since so many people were really asking about noting, as you said, that multilingual students are both over-identified and also under-identified. And you talked about this a bit, but I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about what teachers should know about why this happens and what are some more things that they could do about it.
Sure. So I think what happens is we tend to do the same things that we do for monolingual students, for multilingual students in the special education evaluation process. That means doing a cognitive evaluation, doing an achievement evaluation, then getting the team together. And we leave it at just those two data points and maybe, some of the teacher feedback and things like that. But for multilinguals, it has to be beyond that. It has to include observation, evaluation of their native language, parent interview, observation in multiple contexts. So you want to see how they perform in the gen ed classroom, but you also want to see how they perform in the special ed class or in the ESL classroom. Because in small groups, students will talk. In the gen ed classroom, they may not be ready to talk. And we want to see how they're responding to instruction. So we want to see the data collect in the benchmarking process. We want to see how they respond to tier intervention. And we want to see how the observations in the classroom work. So you get a comprehensive picture of what the student is able to do, not just two of the typical data points that we do. The law is very clear. It doesn't say that you have to use a cognitive evaluation and an achievement evaluation and look for a discrepancy there. It is very clear that you have to look at multiple data, multiple sources of evaluation by multiple evaluators. So the more comprehensive that information gathering could be, the more accurate it would be. So the ESL teacher should be doing those observations. The gen ed teacher should be doing this observation, the SPED teacher, because they're the ones that know the student the most. And so participating in a multidisciplinary team will help yield that. The last thing I will say is eligibility for special education is a subjective process. No matter how we see it, unfortunately, it depends on the team that is looking at that evaluation and the data collected. So if we don't advocate for a comprehensive picture of the child, then we are missing points and will make a determination that is not appropriate for a student. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's so helpful. And I think along similar lines, this question is for Rich. A number of people also were questioning, I think, especially for content teachers, if they suspect that one of their multilingual students may have a learning disability or a disability of some sort, but the student doesn't have a formal diagnosis yet, what are some things you would recommend doing in the class to support those students?
Um, so I'm going to partly defer to Claudia on that because I think she might want to answer that as well. But so if you're a content teacher, general ed content teacher, the most important thing you can do is to make sure that you and your colleagues, that means becoming an advocate in your department, which can be tricky to do, but you need to be sure that you really are fully implementing universal design yeah, for learning and that you really are teaching all the learners. It's one of the reasons we lean on primary sources so much is that they're like a Swiss Army knife tool for teaching all kinds of things. Um, and making sure that you're focusing, as Claudia talked about, on oracy and having students talk with each other and talk with in groups and with you about those primary sources and so forth, using sources that are going to engage them. Um, and the other part of it is just knowing your students, and that's tough if you've got 120 students or 150 students that you see every day. So I wish I could offer to clone yourself or something, but um, again, being an advocate and figuring out where those resources are, being informed about how the system is supposed to work. I love Claudia's slides. I've never seen anything that's quite so clear about how the different elements need to work together. But again, I'm going to toss this to you, Claudia. I think.
I mean, I think what you're saying, it's so great, Rich. And I think the idea of primary sources is so important, specifically when we can think of those as representing the culture of the students, right? So I love the slides that you showed that really had, books in Spanish and, context of students' experiences in their native language. And I think that's what makes the difference is, can they see themselves in the content that they're learning? And that may mean that you have to add to the curriculum. But I think that is an important way to think about how to really reach the students in ways that are asset-based and that respond to their current needs and that increase engagement, because ultimately that's what we want.
I didn't talk about it, but a tool that we use a lot in our work is culturally relevant pedagogy, because it really leans into, for a history, civics, social studies teacher, how do I know what is culturally relevant for my students? And it's a whole sort of program and way of approaching that that can be very useful.
And Rich, in some districts I've worked with, they've actually gathered teachers to do a study of the culture of the students.
Nice.
So they've created like, I know Milford, Massachusetts has created a, a booklet that they share with teachers that was created by teachers about Ecuador and, the typical geopolitical, educational, familiar traditions, food, all kinds of sort of information that would allow you to get to know who the students are, at least in those basic levels, so that you could begin those conversations. And exactly what you said, how do you build those relationships by learning about them, not having them take the onus on learning from us, but really us going to them. So, it could be a fun activity during the summer that they actually pick a country that is representative in their schools, and their job in a group of four is to really go and research Vietnam or whatever country it is that is represented in your district. Learn a few words, um, put those out in your office as a welcome to families so that they feel represented. Make sure the classroom has literature or at least words in their language so that when they come in, it is an asset-based experience where they feel welcome and they want to share.
If I may,
Please.
um, I'm almost going to share a personal experience, but I have a kindergarten. He's going to start kindergarten, and we went to visit his school. And one thing that we like about the school is that they have a flag from Argentina. It's the simplest thing ever. I am from Argentina, and we went there. It's like, my son, that's a flag from my country.
Mhm.
So I feel that the smallest thing and really easy to do make me feel that this is also my place. So sometimes doesn't have to be so big. It's like learning one word and saying hola, and we all know how to say hola. So it's like just trying to put your information, the information you have to to try to connect. We and Miguelina is sharing on the chat box a guide that we created for teachers, and it's similar to things that we presented, and it's about these values, this idea of finding ways to connect. Sometimes it's easier. Maybe the connection is about questions. It's like I have no idea any word of your country. Can you tell me how to say hola in Vietnamese? Because I have no idea. So it's just being interested about the other. And this idea of the initial question about if you have a kid with disability in your class and they are not diagnosed, I will go back to this idea of talk to the family, see what you can create there, like sit together and say,
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm concerned, I see this, and Claudia was sharing this about like this bilingual, like the language at home and the language at school. Maybe he doesn't have these issues at school, at home. So have that conversation. Like, let's bring the families to the school because they need to be part of the community and they need to have an input on what's going on in the kids to they can help us like as a teachers, as professionals, because they if not, they are not going to work with us. We are not going to work together.
One of the best ways to teach government and civics is to do comparative, teach it comparatively. So, for example, you might study on the 250th anniversary of the United States independence, study Argentine independence. And it's a fascinating story. It's almost as complex as our own, maybe more complex than the United States. And families who are from Argentina, at least partly, are experts on that very likely. So it gives that child, it gives that family a chance to be seen as the experts, for them to see themselves as the experts, where they know a heck of a lot more than the staff at the school, and to embrace them doing that can be really empowering for everybody.
And gives the opportunity to these students and these families to be proud of who they are and not feel that they need to hide who they are, especially for these kids that they come from bicultural houses that sometimes they don't know who they are or where they are from. So I think it's important to create that idea of being proud of who they are. And it's like as you were sharing, Rich, like showing in class that there is variety, that we are like there's immigrants with disabilities, that they're like we all can be part of the instruction.
Yeah, Tommy, if I could jump in for a minute, something that I was curious about, because I know that the ADHD program is just a very small part of everything that you do at your organization. And I was wondering if there are any recent trends that you've noticed or things that you think would be really important for teachers and educators to know about more broadly than just within ADHD.
We see a lot of anxiety and depression between our teenagers, especially like, and we can say that there's a lot of ADHD, but also there's a lot of screen fatigue. So we have students that are on their phones most of the times, and that doesn't mean they're ADHD. They're just like so into that technological connection and so disconnected to the real world that you cannot even diagnose ADHD sometimes. You don't know what's going on. And also like understanding that we did a focus group a few weeks ago with teens with ADHD from Latino countries. And it was impressive listen to them saying that they are expecting more from their parents, more at some point, more pressure in relation to school. Like they want to do more, but they need the adults to be more adults sometimes and push them a little bit more. So that's what I can share. And in relation to the Futuro, we do offer like therapy, psychiatry, substance use. There's a lot in relation to substance use, peer support, but I can see anxiety and depressions are big ones. And we see that also in our patients with ADHD a lot.
Yeah, of course, given everything that's going on in the world, I think that makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing. I was wondering also, Dr. Rinaldi, since some feedback we've gotten about our webinars always is not to forget about our very experienced teachers. So for those teachers, I was curious about what you see as the, I guess, current research in the field, new and exciting things. What's happening that you are really excited about that you think we should be on the lookout for in the future or be aware of?
Wow, that's a really hard question, Ariana. I mean, obviously, I read very specific research, so I can't tell you what's really exciting. What I would say is the science of reading has been kind of like in the forefront, but the science of reading for multilingual learners is different. So I would encourage everybody to think about and seek opportunities to kind of look to see whether that science of reading that you're reading and hearing about so much is actually responsive to our multilingual learners. And if not, look for those sessions that are. I would also encourage people to join professional organizations that support the areas that you're interested in. And almost all of those have divisions for multilingual learners or a focus on, dually identified students. So, I feel like oftentimes as we become like as we're 30 plus years in the field, we're not really active in that sense. And I think what's really exciting is being active in a professional organizations. You have so much to give. And so, I mean, I do the same thing. If I were teaching, I'd be in my 33 year, and I am teaching, I'm just teaching older students, but I'm in my 33 year and, I still attend webinars. I go to a national conference. I don't always present, but I just like to go and feel the vibrancy of what education is. And I don't want anybody to lose that. So whether it's local or national or international, seek opportunities that continue to grow and that continue to expose you and challenge your thinking about our students who are multilingual and dually identified.
Super, thank you. Rich, I see that you may be in the middle of answering this by typing, and so I'm hoping you'll also answer it verbally for us. I see this question has come up a few times. Um, Let me pull it up. It's from the caseworker at a nonprofit who's wondering and wants to talk more about advocacy. So, what this person could do to effectively advocate for these policies while also respecting the school staff's expertise without stepping on toes, without damaging partnerships. So, could you talk a little bit about your answer?
Yeah, that was the question I was answering. Um, I think, well, we always need to respect every educator's professionalism. One of the reasons why a number of us took that resolution on teaching disability history to the National Council for the Social Studies, Claudia's right. Those professional associations are just so key. And the resolution passed unanimously. And there were several resolutions that were shot down, and none of the others passed anywhere close to unanimously. So I think the support is there for this work. I think it's a matter of approaching colleagues in some ways like we approach our students, rather than telling them what they should be doing. Ask them questions. What are your struggles? Which students are you most concerned about? And say, well, let's have a conversation over coffee about that. Because I too struggle. Those are the same students that I really have to work harder on. But I do think that nudging colleagues to join those professional associations. The TESOL conference is just awesome. I got to go to that one year. I've been to the Learning Disabilities Association conference, also awesome. Getting outside my professional comfort zone a bit. And I try and go to the National Council for the Social Studies and the Mass Council every year if I can. Not everybody's a conference-oriented kind of person, but there's other webinars and so forth within the profession but others.
Yeah, I guess since we are coming, gosh, to the last 2 minutes, if we could just go around quickly, perhaps the answer is professional associations, but what is one final piece of advice, word, resource, thought that you'd like everyone to take away with you? Dr. Rinaldi, let's start with you.
I would love for you to look at at the slides that I didn't show that have the resources from the federal government that are in multiple languages that you can put in front of people without you having to do the advocacy, but the advocacy is done by the legal documents that are in front of you.
Super. And we'll be sharing these out with everyone. So don't worry, you'll get an email with everything. You don't need to start writing things down right now. Rich, how about you? Final word?
Diverse classrooms of students are the most exciting group of educators in the world. Those students just blow me away. So figuring out ways to lean into that.
Super. And Tommy?
I think it will be connection. Just like try to be open to connect with the kids and the families. We don't know everything. I'm sure we don't know everything. So just be humble enough to even sit with the student and talk to him and ask him like what's a challenge for him, because maybe he can be more like he could express what he's feeling more than what you think. So just being open to the conversations and to connect.
Oh, thank you so much. All three of you, Rich, Tommy, Dr. Rinaldi, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. This hour and a half flew by for me. I could listen to you for another hour and a half minimum. I also would like to thank everyone who joined us today for taking time out of your day to learn about this important topic. We really appreciate the work that you do supporting your multilingual learners and also your students with disabilities.